Sorry I haven't been uploading much these days. I got a lot of stuff, didn't I want to catch up on. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old, and today I'm talking about the new project from Thom Yorke, ANIMA. Hey, so did you know that I hadn't properly listened to any Radiohead until earlier this month? Well, okay, I think I tried listening to Kid A several years ago, but that was about it. I'd been recommended their stuff for years on end. They're one of the most hyped up bands of all time. And since Thom Yorke's solo work is pretty frequently categorized as just straight electronic, when I heard he was releasing another solo album, I decided this was as good a time as any to finally catch up on them. I'd had the whole Radiohead back catalog lying around on my iPod for at least 3 years now, just never being touched because I kept getting distracted by other stuff. But then I just announced on Twitter that I was finally making my way through their catalog, and I actually did make it through my marathon. So even though this is a review of Thom Yorke's solo stuff, I'm gonna include my initial impressions to the main Radiohead discography so far in this typically lengthy and brief segment. So let's get into it. I'll be honest, all signs pointed towards this not being my thing, so I just skipped listening to it entirely. Creep is okay, I guess? I think I needed to be there when this came out to get the most out of it. Out of context, I think it's alright, but I can tell it's not new, and I'm not really interested in returning to it on my own time. I bet my mom and dad would like it, though. Okay, pretty immediately got the hype. Still pretty unique sounding, even now. Didn't properly click for me until a few tracks in. Probably need more repeat listens to grow on this one, and I'm not buying into the overzealous claims of greatest rock album ever conceived by mankind. Bleh. But it is a very solid and cohesive and well-structured album that couldn't have come from any other artists. I'll hang on to this. Okay, mini rant incoming. While this album is very good, and probably my favorite of their albums up to this point, I think this album's experimentalism and weirdness is overhyped by fans to an unreasonable level that it doesn't come even close to living up to. In terms of weirdness, it's like a step above Airs Moon Safari or Röyksopp's Melody AM, and I feel like most of the people mind-blown by this album for how inaccessible or challenging this thing is have just never heard any electronic music before. I remember trying to get into it several years ago, as mentioned before, but I lost interest because I thought it was going to be so much weirder than it actually turned out to be. That said, the hype surrounding this album isn't the band's fault. They still created an album that is altogether very unique in its combination of rock and electronic elements, and very solid in its own right. The fans just need to shut up about it and let it be what it's trying to be. Alright, so this is a Kid A B-Sides collection, and I could tell just by one listen. Pretty scattered and inconsistent, and didn't leave a super strong impression on me as a whole, but certainly had its moments. I'll keep it around just in case it grows on me. This is just a scattered mix of their last 4 albums that meanders all over the place. More consistent than Amnesiac, and I do quite like the Beatles-y piano rock tunes, but I don't know, probably not gonna hang on to it myself. Okay, I think my thoughts on this are most people's thoughts. What are the rest? I'll hang on to this. Alright, I guess this is another experimental one that isn't actually that experimental. More focused than Amnesiac, but didn't find it all that memorable personally. I like Bloom and Codex, and everything else just disappeared from my head immediately after finishing it. This one was also really good from start to finish. Really like the use of the strings on here. There's a good handful of moments that sound like if the cinematic orchestra's Mafleur was actually good. I'll hang on to this one too. Okay, here we go. Now we're finally getting into the stuff that's most relevant to the review, Thom Yorke's actual solo material. And shockingly, it sounds like Kid A and the other electronic heavy Radiohead albums. It's certainly higher effort than King of Limbs, and more focused than Amnesiac again. I'm not sure how much it's gonna have replay value-wise, but I liked it. It's good stuff. If nothing else, worth it for And It Rained All Night. That one was definitely the best track for me. Okay, well, there are really good moments on this thing, and there are kind of boring moments, too. I mean, cool to see him at his most blatantly warp-inspired, but yeah, as a whole, it's nothing incredible. It doesn't properly kick into gear for me until the Mother Load, but again, I did definitely enjoy it. Oh yeah, and bonus horror movie soundtrack, because why not? It's kind of what you would expect Thom Yorke doing a horror movie soundtrack would sound like. Cool for variety, I guess. Which brings us to here. So yes, I will freely admit to being kind of let down by the experimental nature of this guy's work. both on his own and with Radiohead. I mean, the music is still good and certainly has his own unique sound that you can't get elsewhere, so I can't get mad at Yorke himself, more at the overzealous hipster fans who think they're so cool because they listen to such cutting-edge stuff that you never hear on the radio. Ugh. Not that I don't get where that perspective comes from, but as someone who listens to almost exclusively electronic music, I have heard so much stuff that's so much further out there than what Thom Yorke delivers. I suppose the hype can be ignored, though. This album is new, I don't see anyone claiming it's gonna be a game-changing piece of art or anything, so I'll just take it for what it is and evaluate it in that way. The other two Thom Yorke albums did in fact get much better on second listen, so I made sure to give this one a whole bunch of spins as well before I felt I could make a solid judgment. So how does ANIMA fare? It's good, I guess. It doesn't really reveal anything new to me. It doesn't feel like an adventurous, bold new direction for the guy. It's just kind of the Eraser again in a lot of ways, if maybe not as focused around Yorke's lyrics this time and slightly more around the sound design. But at its core, it's just a Thom Yorke project, and a relatively inoffensive one at that. I thought it was cool, but if you want more enthusiasm than that, you're not gonna get it. I liked it, but I didn't love it or think it was anything incredible. The production is as solid as you'd want out of an artist as high profile as him, but it didn't do that good a job of grabbing my attention as I would have hoped. It's a bit of a mixed bag with some excellent moments and some kind of okay moments that aren't that really sonically far removed from each other. And in general, I don't think there's a lot here that you couldn't already get out of a previous release of his. So yeah, may as well discuss individual tracks. Like I said, there are some really good moments on here, just like with every Thom Yorke album. The opener, for instance, lets you know well what you're getting into. Lots of dissonant analog synth pads and stiff drum machine percussion. Lots of menacing atmosphere created here right off the bat. There's moments where there's tons of multi-tracking on his voice and it just layers on top of itself many times over. It sounds really cool. There's also Twist, which is the longest track on here at 7 minutes and justifies it pretty well. Starting out with this kind of minimalistic plaid-esque IDM techno thing, I guess, and progressing plenty with other whistling synth pads. There's a change up halfway into something much more expansive with old-timey detuned pianos and smooth synth washes. It's really nice all the way through and pretty consistently one of my favorite moments on this thing. But directly in between those two tracks is Last I Heard He Was Circling the Drain, which despite the excellent title was a rather unremarkable track, blending completely into the two surrounding tracks without doing much to set itself apart. I suppose it has all these reversed sounding rhythmic synth progressions and again delivers on a pretty cool atmosphere like Traffic and Twist do, but for whatever reason doesn't grab me even close to as much. That's the thing, this album definitely has like an overarching sound and feel that carries over every track on here. And there are some tracks on here that would be much better out of context, but are pulled down by having several other tracks that sound very similar, but just happen to be more attention-grabbing. The Axe, for instance, I would probably like a lot more out of context. It has one of the better hooks on here too. But because it's so sonically similar to everything else on here, it just kind of passes by without leaving a strong impression on me. There are exceptions though. Dawn Chorus, for instance, probably would not be very good to me out of context, but it uses the sameness of the album to its advantage, because while it has a fairly repetitive and one-note instrumental, it does definitely stand out for its much more low-key and minimalistic approach. Yorke sounds even more tired and miserable here than he usually does. On purpose, of course, I know. I was never really looking forward to this track, but it isn't one that I would want removed because it does add some much needed variety. There are also moments where there's maybe one element that really sticks out to me, like the choirs on I Am a Very Rude Person. Those stuck out to me as really cool on first listen, but on repeat visits the rest of the song ended up feeling kinda weak and not sticking with me. Slightly better faring was Impossible Not, which, while again not sounding too different from the rest of the album, is mainly carried by this one excellent bass line that pulled me in more and more with every listen of this thing. Thankfully, the only two tracks left to mention are also two of my biggest favorites. The closer, Runwayaway, was a pretty fun and much more abstract moment. Stands out from the get-go with its use of the guitars and later bringing in this weird spoken word elements that aren't too intrusive. There's also a full orchestra in the background next to some quick-moving John Hopkins Immunity-style percussion. That's a really good track. But I think my favorite track on here is probably Not the News, with its heavily reverby, bleeping and blooping synths alongside its thudding synthetic percussion, eventually breaking into this gorgeous orchestral section like 2.5 minutes in. It sounds absolutely incredible from start to finish. But it's also over much too quickly. It's a pretty short track, like just under 4 minutes. So yeah, that's ANIMA, and yeah, a lot of mixed thoughts on it. Some really good stuff, some not as good stuff. But I think the strongest overall feeling I have on it is just one of ambivalence. Like, I feel like it's trying to combine the strengths of the Eraser and Tomorrow's Modern Boxes, but it doesn't really live up to either in my eyes. I know I said I didn't think the latter was incredible, but I definitely was more consistently engaged by it. It still has that stretch from the Motherlode to Pink section that I really liked every time, and even the less interesting moments were still more enjoyable than the less interesting moments here. It grew on me more than this did, and I only listened to it twice compared to the 5, 6, 7 times I gave ANIMA a chance. I guess I am saying, of the 3 solo Thom Yorke projects so far, this is probably my least favorite. It's certainly the one I feel least compelled to want to come back to. While it has some cool stuff in it, and the production value is certainly something to behold, it just didn't really stick with me in a big way. It's cool, but it's mostly forgettable, and I don't think I need to hear it anymore. I'm overall feeling a 6.5 out of 10 on it. But of course, this is all just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. If you want to add yourself to that list or make me a review, something, a link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.